Welcome back to Broncos Beat. Alexis Perry here alongside Matt Boyer, James Palmer, and Cecil Lammey. Leading up to Sunday's game between the Broncos and Chiefs, the question that dominated Denver's media market was, how can Denver's defense contain Patrick Mahomes? The Broncos answered that question by holding Mahomes to just 15 completions and 200 yards, the fewest number in both categories for Mahomes this season, and did not allow the Chiefs to convert on a single third down attempt, marking just the sixth time since 1991 the team didn't allow a single third down conversion in a game. How was Denver's defense able to accomplish such a feat?
They were able to accomplish it because Vic Fangio got to do what he wants to do, play zone and send four after the quarterback. And you were getting home with four. That was the nice thing. Like, you would show some blitz, you would have some guys come up to the line of scrimmage, and then they would back off in coverage. And I'm not saying they were confusing Pat Mahomes, because that's very difficult to do. And he's set up in that Andy Reid offense to beat any sort of confusion that you throw at him. But they were able to get pressure with four. And guys like Draymond Jones being back out there, I know that made Vic Fangio happy, made me happy, right? You saw Malik Reed, Bradley Chubb, all these guys creating this pressure, making your quarterback uncomfortable. And a quarterback makes his money on third down and in the red zone. And on Sunday, the Broncos really limited what the Chiefs did on third down, obviously, 0 for 8, and in the red zone. So it was a good effort, and that effort started with that pass rush.
And I will give Vic Fangio some credit, though, Cecil, because you said it's hard to confuse Patrick Mahomes. I was on those Chiefs calls after the game, and Mahomes said there were several times where they brought something to me, and I didn't have an answer for it. And usually that offense that Andy Reid has, and you know this, has answers for everything. And obviously Pat knows where all those answers are. Sorry, Patrick, his mama gets very upset. But he had opportunities to make plays and didn't have an answer for it. So I think some of this credit, Matt, does go to what Vic Fangio and that defensive staff did dial up, specifically what they dialed up on third down. It was a lot of what they did on those plays and what they came at Mahomes with that, you know, contributed to that 0 for 8.
Yeah, James, you mentioned it. You know, I think the plan coming in was a great one, especially when you think about how many times Mahomes has been sacked throughout this season. The only time he was sacked 3 times in a game previously was that loss against the Raiders earlier this year. So the plan was good. I also want to single out, you know, Bryce Callahan, the job he did on Tyreek Hill. I thought he was fantastic. So the secondary and the defensive line playing in unison did a good job. And remember, we said it in the first block, 14 of the points the Chiefs had did not come from offensive football. So I think the Broncos defense did what they wanted to do coming in. It just, some of those big plays they couldn't overcome.
Well, the Broncos were happy to activate guys like AJ Boye, Draymond Jones, and Demarcus Walker off of IR for this game against the Chiefs. We saw those guys contribute yesterday, and there were a number of guys who contributed to this performance by Denver's defense. Who stood out the most to you?
I saw Bradley Chubb get in the kitchen of some of his teammates. Now, that was later on in the game, but I think it's very important to note because it's that type of leadership. And Matt mentioned Bryce Callahan. I thought his leadership on the field was outstanding as well. But it's that rallying together, you know, your guys that have that energy on the field. And it's really that elevation in energy that you saw from this Broncos defense. And with guys like Bradley Chubb playing with a ton of heart, Shelby Harris with a ton of heart, Bryce Callahan with his energy as well, I thought the rest of the defense responded to that. So it was almost like a return of energy for this team from those players returning from injury.
I like that you brought up Bradley Chubb because I think this is worth noting because I was talking to some people in the building this week who were starting to hint at me going, this is starting to be Bradley Chubb's team. Like, he is getting into that leadership role and taking another step in it throughout the week, not just on Sundays, but what he's doing throughout the week. And I think we're starting to see a little bit of a changing of the guard with the way Bradley Chubb is carrying himself. You don't want to push Von Miller out the door, but I think it is worth noting what he has done in the eyes of those people that make decisions in that building over the last couple of weeks, that not just with his play on the field that he has his legs under him, which he's playing the way we expect him to play, but he's now taking on a larger role. You saw that on the field on Sunday, but the people I'm talking to, it's happening every day of the week.
Building off of Bradley Chubb a little bit, we saw some frustration from guys like Bradley Chubb and Shelby Harris. So how can this team turn that frustration into fuel for the remainder of this season?
Well, Alexis, I think, you know, James and Cecil just mentioned it. Shelby Harris and Bradley Chubb are two of the most, you know, fiery leaders that this locker room has. And when you think about the great teams in the NFL, the top tier teams, they have guys like that that can push a team to another level. We saw it on the other side of the football yesterday with the Chiefs. Tyrann Mathieu, I think, is one of those guys in this league, kind of comparable, a very fiery leader, a guy who is kind of the force on that Chiefs defense. And that's the role that both Chubb and Harris can play for this defense. So while you don't necessarily want to see the confrontations that the Broncos had on the sidelines yesterday, I think that you need that fire and that energy when you're thinking about going from a good team to one of the best.
It is a fine line, though. It is a very fine line that has to be walked, because those are also the moments that can tear a locker room apart. We saw it happen here when there was a big separation, Cecil, between the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball, when big personalities like Aqib Talib and Chris Harris were here. You look at what's happening in New Orleans with Michael Thomas, one of the most fiery guys in the league, one of the best players in this league, and that can start to cause problems. So you have to make sure when you have guys that have that personality, that there's other aspects of your locker room that hold it together, because it can split things too, especially when you're not winning football games.
Listen, pay attention. Know that you're supposed to be better than this. Every team in the league is dealing with COVID and no preseason and all these, and every team's dealing with injuries, some more than others, and the Broncos are certainly up there on that list. But listen to these leaders. They're telling you these things because you are supposed to be better than this. So listen to Bradley Chubb, and you can go far.